Hello, everybody, and welcome back. So here we are with a continuation of iteration number 1 of the story from the initial story proposal that Zach recorded back yesterday. So again, this one session is still going. We're just chopping the video up so we don't risk losing anything. So yeah, some interesting ideas are coming in. Now we still have some people that have been extremely patient over here in the classroom. Let's go ahead and get Martin in. And Martin, let's bring you in. How you doing, Martin?
Mr. Alberts.
Good day. How's my volume?
It's perfect, sir.
Okay, great. Again, you'll probably hear this a lot, but I'm honored to be talking to you guys. I had quite an issue with the encounter. Well, you made the encounter history, but about like in my experience, a lot of the game really goes on about the encounters that are happening right now. So if let's say you take World of Warcraft and you're doing quests and everything really ties in within a certain part of the main storyline. So I thought maybe you need another floating element that describes the actual encounters that are happening at the moment that the player is going to play the game.
I see what he said. He said present day, where we are present day.
Right, and we haven't really. What we're doing right now is establishing backstory. It ties. Okay, if you want to bring World of Warcraft in, which I gotta admit, I try to avoid that in these meetings, but how can you really?
Yeah,
you know?
you can't really.
But there is a pre-existing history even in World of Warcraft, which goes all the way back to the original RTS game Warcraft, which was humans versus orcs. And you know how the two races met and started fighting, and that was, of course, before Blizzard was really taking that story extremely seriously. And then that culminated in Warcraft 3, which had an extremely robust story. That's where you meet, you really get to know Thrall, and you meet Arthas, and the whole idea with the Lich King and all of that. And then that, of course, just branched over into World of Warcraft. But all of that has happened before you ever picked up your very first character, even if you started in Vanilla WoW. What we're doing is explaining how we got to the point where the character is going to pick up. Now, where we go from here is going to be its own kit and caboodle.
Well, actually, let's.
But I'm fine with exploring it.
Yeah, let's entertain it for just a second, if you don't mind.
Oh, I wasn't trying not to entertain
No, I know. I'm just saying, let's go ahead and create a new floating bubble.
I'm trying to think of a good place to put it. Let me stick it up
Something
here.
away from all the text, just to keep things.
Well, the reason I only mention it, the only reason I'm bringing it up, is that when you say that you have a problem with the encounter, this section, because you're not the first person to say you have a problem with this is prehistory. This is already done. It's over. It's in the past, and we have moved on. There was an encounter. It led to a war. The war is over, and now our game is literally going to take place sometime in the years thereafter.
But Martin, what you are talking about now is present day. What is happening in the grand scheme
Yes,
of
exactly.
things? Okay.
Exactly. What are the encounters that the player feels that are really part of their play, their experience? Because exactly like what Zach said about Warcraft, if you were playing the first Warcraft games, you felt like you were totally part of what happened between the humans and the orcs, the portal, and all the thing. But now we're writing this and people are giving awesome suggestions about it. But I was just wondering, how is it gonna tie into what the players are actually gonna...
Well, check this out, Martin. This is really cool. You're the first person who gets to toss out some ideas. Where do you think we should be right now in current time? What do you think should be happening?
Well, I just had one idea.
Okay.
I just had one idea. You're putting me on the spot, but
You started it.
It's well, that's true. That's true. I had the idea about the sentient robots or the sentient beings, or the artificial intelligence might actually go to the Elysians, or sorry, I can't pronounce it either, but
no, that was pretty good.
to like see if they can get some kind, maybe from the necromancers, get some kind of real life, or get some kind of soul or something, seeking for longer life than they would get from the Terrans.
A Blade Runner tie-in. I love it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
That was one of my main ideas, that we could also. I know you're trying to stay away from gameplay, but you could do a lot of cool things with that from a gameplay perspective. Also, and not
just remember this. And you're right about we're trying to stay away from gameplay, and even I have accidentally gotten into that a little bit. But I always come back to, if just look at it from a writing, a novel point of view. If we're touching on subjects like what you just said right there, could be explored into all sorts of really cool stuff, then that pretty much guarantees that it could be, if handled properly, turned into very cool gameplay.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And
so
it will also
go ahead. Sorry.
It will also give the player an idea of whoever is looking at the story, that the necromancers might not just be bad, because a lot of the story around them is based about they're outlaws and they're bad, and maybe people could look like, hey, but they're giving these sentient beings something that they're really wanting to. So yeah,
well, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, I like the idea of the higher forms, the dominant society of Aletheia, really looking at the necromancers as outcasts. But at the same time, I would also very much like the player to eventually discover that, perhaps they are a bit misunderstood. I think evil is what we conceive it to be. There are some things that I think we can all agree are fundamentally wrong and should be avoided, like don't murder people, that kind of thing. But there's also a lot of gray area that is just based on your society, your upbringing, the cultural climate at the time. And I think that's I'd like to expose and kind of play off a lot of that, especially in terms of some of the forbidden magics. Yeah, it involves some things that generally would be considered taboo. Most of us would kind of balk at the idea of taking a dead person and using their body to do, heaven only knows what. But at the same time, these are still people. They're not just, evil, twisted folks that have, no emotion and no concern and no motivating drive themselves. They're still people. They still have their own lives to lead, and they're not necessarily bad people.
Exactly.
And you're talking about the necromancers.
The necromancers, of course. And that's also a very generic term, folks, so I'm not sold on that.
Which could change, because I know, I've already seen several people that have problems with it.
Do we have to call them necromancers? No, but it's a something I can use for now, so I'm not
making up too many terms. It's our working title for them.
That's right. Anything else?
Yeah, Martin, come on. Keep going. You're on a roll, man.
Well, no, sorry, I don't. I was just thinking that maybe a lot of stuff that's been mentioned has been focused on the necromancer, so I was kind of hesitant to focus this on the necromancers too, but it draws a nice... there's a lot you can do with them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Current time experiences.
I think they also are standing out as being one of the largest possibilities for that third playable race a couple of people have been clamoring for.
I did see a mention earlier come across in the question channel when you were in the middle of talking. I think it was with NATO at the time, where somebody had said, what if they weren't banished to like the southern hemisphere, but instead were banished to some other world entirely, which could be very interesting, because then over time they're going to evolve.
Right, and I had actually considered doing that. The only reason I didn't is that I wanted the necromancers, or whatever we're going to call them. Please, I'm just going to stick with the term for terms of
just
talking.
for now, sure.
I wanted the necromancers to be one of the primary reasons why some hostility started between the Terrans and the Alethians in the first place. It also kind of gives sort of an underhanded tone to the Alethians, because I really don't want them to be the good guys, so to speak. So it was, yeah, all right, so the Terrans need to come in and mine our Arcanocite. Fine. Go get it from these exiled lands from these people we don't really like. I liked that idea because it's kind of slimy.
Sure.
It's kind of terrible, you know, to say, like, well, this part of the world full of these people that we're trying to disregard, go strip mine their part of the world, and we don't really care what happens to them. And then all kinds of nastiness comes out of that. The only way we could really pull that off is to make sure that the necromancers, while they are outcast, while they are exiled, are still on this world. And that also ties into another, you know, kind of a...
Sure, they could have possibly put together their own, whatever the requirements are for the mass teleportation, and they could have put a group of their own people, a colony, onto another planet as well, unknown to
Absolutely.
the Mage Lords. And so... perhaps they could even be on this other planet. They are planning to
come back. Yeah, exactly. And there's
and
so many
reclaim
different
their
ways.
rightful place on Alethea.
Yeah, I'll just throw that in.
But the whole thing has been kept very hush hush. They're still down in the southern hemisphere.
Let's just say planning secret revenge. The revenge of the Sith.
Oh, God. A booby?
A booby. I've been working on this for quite some time. Okay, I'll quit with the voices. All right, so was there anything else, Martin?
Oh, yeah, there is.
There
Come
is.
on, Martin.
I want 5 more ideas.
What you got,
starting
Martin?
now?
You're on a
5.
roll,
Fire them
man.
off. What's the first one?
Okay. Calm down. I had an idea just where you were talking about some kind of a small colony of Terrans that are going to the Aletheans because they're like people going to Mecca. I'm forgetting the words.
I know where you're going.
Yeah, exactly. So they would like really see I think it was NATO that already made that suggestion. So I'm kind of stealing this, but yeah. So they really
I can't spell.
see Aletheans as the super beings, the higher beings.
I just can't spell it all.
Was one other thing.
Okay. I had to have Zach fix that spelling because I knew right now Gavin was probably twisting all over the
Well,
place.
that's actually why I misspelled it. He
Oh,
was
okay.
doing the whole thing with your idea sucks, so my little quiet passive-aggressive revenge was to just misspell something he'd have to stare at for a while. Okay, that's one idea. You got 4 left you got to throw out.
Well, most of my ideas depart in games that I really like. And sorry, I'm gonna take this back to WoW, but is that you play a game or there's a story, and in the beginning of the story, it seems to be really clear what's good and what's bad, and which side's good and which side's bad. And as soon as the story evolves, you get it gets kind of blurry. You're like, wow, okay, now I totally understand why these guys did this, or I totally understand why they started the war. Or,
Well, and that's actually something that I loved about the culmination of Wrath of the Lich King. Because, okay, plug your ears, folks, if you are still trying to play through WoW and you haven't yet figured out how all that ends, because at this point in WoW, if you're a player, of course, the Lich King has been killed, but go watch the cinematic. It's available in Dalaran. But we find out that Arthas wasn't necessarily trying to kill everyone on the planet. It was, in fact, his control over the Lich armies that was keeping them at bay as best he possibly could. So at the 11th hour, we discover that Arthas was doing everything he could to try to save the world with what little remained of his actual soul. And I love that kind of thing. I mean, it goes all the way back to Darth Vader, and even though he slaughters children and choked his wife, somehow there's some good left in him, you know? And as twisted as that is, it was cool. And there's nothing wrong with exploring that. That's why I love the idea of the necromancers not necessarily being evil so much as misunderstood. Yeah, they do some things that not everybody would really dig, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they should just be disregarded out of hand as being bad people.
yeah, exactly.
Exactly, but if you're starting the game and you're not one of these people, they're going to look bad.
Yeah.
They're the bad people.
Yeah.
And it's through discovery, through story
Through
and
playing
interaction.
with them. Yeah.
Let
Let people play through.
Yeah, wait a minute.
Well, what I would and this is kind of a segue, and I think we actually mentioned this somewhere in the history of the Mage Lords of the Citadel, or perhaps in the Mage Wars. I really do lose track, but it's something that I'm sure did come up. That the history of the Mage Wars, which of course ties directly into the Necromancers, has been kind of guided, kind of augmented by the Mage Lords to further their own ends. The Mage Lords have made the Necromancers out to be a lot worse than they really are, to keep a tighter control over society. You gotta demonize them a little bit. You have to. There has to be a smear campaign. That's the only way to control your people, is to take your enemy and make them look bad.
I mean,
Yeah, Vagina writes history.
have we never seen anything like that happen before?
All
in
the time.
Over in Rome?
Or in the
Vatican,
Middle East.
anyone? Well, yeah.
You know, it happens even today.
Absolutely. All right, so we have a few ideas. Anything else come to you, Martin?
No, I'm sorry, but thanks for your time.
No, that's awesome though. We've got a new bubble started, and as we come up with ideas to go into the current timeline, we will need to start adding them in here, because I completely agree with you. We are working on history, but we need to work up to where we are now. So outstanding. Well, thank you very much, sir, for coming in with your suggestions.
Sorry I had to put you on the spot.
Oh, come on, it's fun stuff. He can put us on the spot.
No worries, no worries.
Okay, Martin, you have a good one, man. Bye.
Take care.
Okay, let's see. Now we've got Mr. Thomas
Ireland.
Let's bring him in.
Thomas.
Hello.
Hey, Thomas.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Brilliant, okay. Yeah, hello guys. I wanted to go over a couple of things that you've already talked about, just put in my 2 cents.
Sure.
I suppose the first one would be the idea of calling Earth Earth. I think it's a really good idea to actually call Earth Earth.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see. When you say
Sorry, I'm in
something,
Australia, so
if I have to move the map to some other area, I might ask you to stop talking for just a second, because we really just destroy the audio when I start tracking too much.
Okay, so we're looking
I
at the
noticed.
Earth. What's your thoughts there?
All right, well, the idea of calling Earth Earth, I really think is a good idea, simply because everybody already has a perspective that, Earthlings are basically, these resource-hungry people, these people who aren't adverse to the idea of, the conquest of another nation for its resources.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could probably work on that idea just by basically calling Earth Earth instead of calling it something else. People already have these prescribed ideas about, what Earthlings are. So
Okay, right.
it kind of makes sense to do that.
And I think that's what Zach where he was coming from originally. Correct, Zach?
Yeah, that's why I decided to keep it Earth when I first rented the initial draft. But I fully respect those who see it a different way. Okay, and we already mentioned the idea, but let's go back to it. Let's just make sure everybody sees where I was coming from, even you. Have you played Gears of War?
Yeah.
And you played Gears of War, especially the second one, because the first one, while I loved the game, I felt it had about as much story as the underside of my shoe, because they just don't explore much. It's such a visually rich game, and you can tell there's some history, and they allude to all these really cool things. I mean, Marcus is in jail for some reason we don't know, and he has a father who was betrayed, and there was a trial, but man, everything else is just kind of up in the air. In the second one, they start.
Agree.
Yeah, in the second one, they start to explore a little bit more of that, which I liked. But then you had that really that militant kind of following with our president or superintendent, whatever they call him, over the COG army, pacing back and forth in the very beginning of the game, giving this military speech about, it's our last bastion, our last stand. And we start to suddenly understand a lot more about society, about this kind of socialist sort of group that is the COGs and that sort of thing. But it didn't have to take place on Earth at all. Just by watching all of that, all of those cinematics, you start to get a feel for these kind of people, because it does reflect something that we know very well here on the planet Earth. They are human. They communicate in ways that are very familiar to us. But the fact that it was removed, NATO's right, did offer a certain degree of freedom. So I can actually see both sides of the conflict here.
What happens if, in thousands of years from now, and we start getting out and about? what happens if we leave Earth because we've more or less, exhausted it of all of its natural resources, and Earth is just beat up and destroyed, and we've found some other planet that that's become our home. Now we've colonized other planets throughout the galaxy or wherever, as you've already said. But what if Earth did exist? But I mean, it's something that exists in old ancient texts and could be revisited, but it's
something like Battlestar.
Yeah, but it's not. Well, it's not a glorious place to go back to.
Right.
So we go back and see Wally.
It's
Well, I still have my own thoughts. I think we did actually see that in Battlestar, but that's all my own theorization.
But I mean, what if it did? Because it's old, ancient history, and if somehow that came into play in present time. It's been abandoned for so long, or maybe it's not completely abandoned. Maybe there's, some sort of horridly mutated strain of humans from so far back.
Or a small remaining race of beach bums who just moved on to Bon Air, and that's where they live now.
And that would be us.
Yes.
But I'm just saying. I mean, it's we've evolved over thousands of years. And it all came from Earth if we wanted to leave Earth there. But Earth's not something that we go traveling to and there's all of our cities and everything else. I'm, just with this idea I'm just tossing on the table. What if it's just...
Used up and disregarded?
Completely used up. A horrible... Think rundown Blade Runner, which is already run down, but now really...
Well, anything that's not, a ruin of a Blade Runner-like city is a strip mine or something. What if the whole thing was just... desecrated and there's nothing left.
But somehow, how Martin was starting to talk about current times, what if however, so we would need to get it worked into the story, but what if somehow now having to go back there for whatever reason.
Well, you could turn it into almost like a ship graveyard. We used it as our launching pad to start space exploration, but we depleted it so much to get to the stars that it's just now derelict.
Get to the stars, the wars that we've had with ourselves.
Everybody's saying Firefly. Yeah. And
every single thing we've written on the board, people, we can tie to something.
Sure,
especially
absolutely.
Voldemort. Good heavens.
Oh, yeah. I mean, come on. Voldemort now stars in our MMO.
That's right. But
thank you, NATO.
But I was just looking at a balance where, there was some comment about, remove Earth, and then, as Thomas is saying, he definitely likes the idea of having Earth there. I like having the idea of Earth being involved, me personally, in some way, if we're wanting to stick with the Terrans being of human descent. It just, again, ancient history is where Earth was. Just, again, I'm just throwing stuff on the table.
I really was thinking along the lines of flavor text, essentially, as a kind of abject lesson, I guess. It could even be a situation whereby, the Alethians actually find Earth and they realize, this is what the potential of, the Terrans is.
That's
this is something that's going to happen to our world.
Well, you can almost...
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it almost becomes like Independence Day, where the Terrans become like the invading race. They go to a world, use up all of its resources, then pack up and move somewhere else.
Actually, guys, give me just a second, because I'm going to destroy the audio with what I'm about to do.
Okay.
So bear with me just a moment, because I want to do some fancy-ish things with the little mind map here.
We're all doomed.
Yeah, I know. Let's do this. On the topic of Earth, we have those who want to keep it, and we have those who want to do away with it. And I'm going to take the do away with it part, and we'll just graft it over to the other side.
I feel like I'm in a Hitchhiker's Guide episode.
Yes, let's just put mostly harmless and move on. And so let's see.
It was removed for an international byway.
Yes, exactly. So in terms of keeping it, we as humans could relate to that. Ooh, where'd we fly away to? Oh, okay, we're up here. I had to keep typing to find out where, because this thing does a really good job of moving you around.
Something else that could be really helpful is some of the areas that we're not working in right now. Let's start making or taking advantage of minimizing all the way back, like at the root level.
Yeah, and I'll do that in here in just a second. Just bear with me, guys. I know that this eats up a little bit of time, but these mind maps need to be managed. So there we go. Thank you. So we can relate to there being an Earth. nice historical possibilities. Could be site of an ancient ruin. I mean, depending on how far out we're picturing society actually moving. Could be discovered by the Elethians. And it could be, in its own way, a cautionary tale of, of what humans are capable of. Now, doing away with it. It does open up a little more freedom.
Actually, you can throw this in too, just as another one that Gavin just threw out. It also could be the home of the rich.
There you go.
Because it could.
So, we open up a little more freedom in terms of development because you're doing away with all historical referencing. You don't have to say that, we finally established peace in the Middle East and the East and West finally shook hands and became friends. We don't have to worry about insulting anybody with that because...
Well, we don't even have to, even if we keep it, we don't have to say that because if we're talking Earth being, if we go with the idea of it being ancient history,
right.
Then if we want it to back up to our time, that's ancient history cubed or squared, way back. Wait.
It's been lost.
Yeah, it's lost, exactly.
All right. So let's see. Was there anything else that we need to throw in here? Because really, the only thing I wanted to put in the idea of doing away with it is just for the kind of more open-ended freedom that it might allow for, but we can still define a human condition that feels familiar.
Well, let's get Thomas involved. Let's get his thoughts. He started this.
Yeah. Now he wants to keep it.
I know,
and I think we've hit most of his points here.
I suppose, a lot of it really just comes down to whether or not you want to keep any pre-notions of what humans should be. If you want to come up with a completely new idea of what humans should be, then obviously don't call it Earth. Don't have any sort of, link to what everybody already knows humans are. In this situation, it just comes down to, whether or not you wanted to use it as a plot device, or if you wanted to start completely fresh and just, start, basically creating your own humans.
That's true. But what are your thoughts?
But the problem is, I kind of like the idea of keeping it just because I think, in that sense, you don't have to worry so much about establishing... you hear about an alien race called the Elethians, and you can almost immediately tell they're going to have pointy ears and they're going to shoot magic, without even, thinking too much about what they are.
No, and that's good. That's actually one of the things that I wanted to pull from the name, was that it sounds kind of elvish, and it sounds kind of mystical and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't require a huge amount of backstory to really get that idea across. The idea with Terrans, of course, is almost everybody immediately associates it with technology because people think of humans today. I can't remember the last time I've ever heard anybody talking about a druid or a cult.
No, we all want our
iPhones.
Magic.
Heck yeah. Where's our iPad?
That's right.
Shooting a fireball would be fun, but an iPad is also just fun.
Exactly. It's like there's an app for that. Go away.
So true.
It's not something that I can really say one way or another should be done. It's got to be purely based on what other people really kind of want.
We're just interested in how you feel on it, really. It's kind of your floor at the moment.
I think we should keep it as Earth. I think the idea of having this pre-notion of humans have technology and the non-humans have magic is so strong when you have this concept of okay, they've come from Earth. Then you don't need to explain it; it's already there.
Yeah, people draw conclusions quite fast when we're talking about humans and Earth. Absolutely, and I completely agree with Thomas. I personally would vote for keeping it in and working it into the story. If of course
it doesn't even necessarily have to be the home planet. It could just be part of the history, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. But, origin, but not necessarily the capital.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or a cautionary tale, like you mentioned.
Because we all know that in the end, they're probably going to be based out of Caprica.
Oh wow!
It's unspoken.
Yeah, we just take that. We take that for granted. Oh well. Anyway.
Okay, so any
All right,
other
well-
ideas, Thomas?
Yeah, I do have a couple others.
Cool.
This idea of crystals, and good luck finding it in the thing that you just closed down. I kind of like the idea of crystals being less static and more. It's going to sound a lot like WoW, but the idea of like a world tree equivalent of crystals has a lot more plot, I guess. I mean, you could potentially have something along the lines of, Terrans discover the fact that, crystals grow at a certain rate, and, they're tied to these more dense crystals, which can, soup up their Porsche, whatever, starship by 50%. So long as there's some sort of incentive to actually track down these better crystals, it becomes a plot device. And also, it kind of ties into the idea of, I guess, because you want to have good and bad Terrans, you can't really have good Terrans that advocate the destruction of, another culture's way of life. The idea of having crystals and taking their crystals and taking away their only source of magic, you leave them basically as we were, a couple 100,000 years ago. It'd be very difficult to justify that being, trying to play a good character. You'd have to try and have some sort of way of replenishing those crystals. I think this kind of gives it an ability to just basically say, oh, well, so long as we, I treat them like trees, essentially. So long as you don't cull too many and you don't take too many out of the forest, you can still wait for them to grow back.
I think
and it just gives,
Well, I think you're giving humans way too much credit. I think there's always going to be like a small group of people who think the way you do. You're tree huggers, so I guess in the end, in this case, would become crystal huggers. But
no.
No, hang on.
A little bit religious.
Hang
Yeah,
on.
go ahead.
But I think generally, if the overall majority, the overall mentality was that the Alethians have a surplus. They have plenty of these crystals, while we have none and we need them. I don't think most folks would care. Again, they just want their new iPad. And if their new iPad runs better because they get these crystals, then fine, they're great with it.
Yeah, I consider myself part of the good people. I'm nice and caring. Damn it, I want my iPad.
Well, okay. I think everybody in the room right now would consider themselves to be generally, good-natured, good people. But our technology, the circuit boards and whatnot, are polluting this planet. Thrown away computers are literally destroying planet Earth even as we speak, and yet we just want more. We want the next gadget, and I'm not even trying to get up on a pedestal. I'm just citing an example in modern history. A lot of this stuff gets shipped out to third world countries so that the mercury can be stripped out of it, poisoning people and killing them. And yet we don't. It's not like we're like, oh, well, I can't buy any more iPads because I'm supporting the exploitation of lesser people. No, we still run out to Best Buy and pick up the latest and greatest thing.
Look, the problem is if you take that too far, you immediately turn the Alethians into the good guys and the Terrans as the bad guys, which was exactly what we were trying to avoid. I mean, from a morale perspective, I mean, it's very easy for people to say, okay, yeah, I support the idea of, supporting the Alethians because they're not going to be, stealing somebody else's resources or anything like that when they have the right bot. It doesn't matter. But in the game, they don't have to make any sort of proactive, activity to justify what they're saying, essentially.
Well, you could twist it.
I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Well, you could twist it a little bit more. Let's say there's so much of this Arcanosite on their world. It's the equivalent of, us going to the Indians with little glass beads and trading for gold, and they're just going, oh, yeah, well, you want some of this? There's no problem. We want some of this technology stuff that you've got. So this is stuff just laying everywhere. And they don't really care, but they want the technology, so they don't even really consider us on par with them.
Yeah, another interesting arc that could come from this is, humans are really an industrial and creative people even today. And you can't help but think, okay, so we come across this crystal that has all these great powers. Somebody somewhere is going to drag this stuff off to a lab. It's not like we're going to be like, oh, cool, well, let's just pop this into my gun and start shooting. It's going to have to be studied and processed. We're going to have to find different ways to use it. But how could you even imagine that we wouldn't be trying to come up with a way to produce it? So it's real easy to imagine an arc in which the humans have come up with, not quite as good as Arcanosite, but a crystalline substance that mimics Arcanosite in some form or fashion that can be used to a limited degree.
Yeah, well, truth be told, I hadn't actually thought of that. I think, I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty much all fluff anyway, from which you can develop some, some plots.
Oh, well, thanks.
What? Oh, that's fluff.
You can't just disregard the story like that. That's why we're here.
Finding religion.
Regarding the story, there's a lot of very good plots in that, and I'm not saying there aren't. I'm just saying, this is something that players should be deciding.
It's all just a lot of fluff. Let's go shoot some guns and fire some spells. Come on.
All right, I didn't mean it like that.
Who's gonna be the tank? Come on.
All right, well, I've got a couple other ideas that I might shoot at you. The idea of Aleuthians being, whatever, they're being close to humans. I kind of prefer the idea of Aleuthians not being so human. The idea of them being hundreds of years, hundreds of thousands of years, whatever, with these crystals, might have mutated them a little bit. I kind of like the idea of somebody choosing an Aleuthian, I don't know, evocation specialist, somebody who's shooting fireballs, having like really, really calloused and large hands that are designed for that kind of stuff, or people who are like water elementalists having gills and stuff like that. This association between what they actually do and what their body is kind of like an evolutionary thing.
It's good enough for me to do a branch, actually.
Idea.
Yeah, let him jot that down. I really like that personally.
Give me half a second. There we go.
So since I would be an arcane specialist, what would I look like?
Purple.
Scary. Glowy eyes.
You'd be small, fluffy, pink with big eyes.
What? Get the hell out of here.
Buddy rabbit tail.
And you squeak when you walk.
Please make that a playable character.
Absolutely, and that way you'd be the most... But see, that's the thing. In Alethian society, the color pink is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
So you walk out onto the battlefield in bright neon, put your eyes out pink, and everyone just runs in fear. I love it.
He looks like a Moogle.
Oh, God.
Yes. A tribble with eyes.
That is a great idea, though. I definitely like that. Physical mutation based off of what they're kind of
and that
specialty is.
on the flip side can easily be reflected in the Terrans through bioengineering and cybernetic augmentation.
Oh, absolutely. And nanotechnology.
I'm getting there. Hang on.
Hey, I'm sorry, man. I love my nanites.
We never know.
I gotta be honest with you. Since you started talking about nanites, I've got this image of this, human mage with like this swarm of nanites around him, and he's directing them.
Dude, that's so awesome.
It is.
We've so
actually.
got to have that. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Well, I mean, that'd be a great way
I can already
to.
think of the particle system.
Well, no, it's.
Yeah, go ahead.
It'd be easy to do. I would keep it to something that was more texture than anything else, if you want to keep it low. But that'd be a great way to explore the really almost magical concept of force fields. What if it's not so much a force field as it is a highly concentrated field of nanites that can just move around you, and they kind of cluster together to form a protective shield.
Or what if, as one of those necromancers, what if I was able to cast a swarm of nanites that like just consumed you? And you're screaming and falling to the ground, and it basically rips off of you and defines you. So now it's a new you.
Oh my heavens!
Nanites.
I'm just thinking Gara from Naruto right now with the sand that swarms around him and takes shape.
Ah,
Acts as a shield for him when it needs to be.
Anime geek.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, I'll get rid of that. I was just having some fun. Technology. Because it did say bioengineering and cyber technology and nanotechnology. But I was just being silly.
okay, yes, definitely got some good ideas coming, Thomas.
We'll just say physical alteration. We won't say mutation, because mutation kind of brings in its own can of worms. I'm fine with there being mutants, but me personally, I really like the idea of mutants being, and I know this is trite, I know it's contrived. Mutants are kind of like your monsters, because I only picture like what's his face, the sloth from the Goonies. It's just kind of face kind of sliding off and moaning at you while they come to eat your brains or something. So what else you got for me before I disconnect you and disregard you? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Lovely. Let me think. Death mechanic. I won't get into gameplay too much, but like the idea of like the backstory behind, players are going to die. I assume.
I'm terrified of
some
that.
sort of
I just want to say that right now. I really,
Okay.
I want to be really careful about approaching the death mechanic in terms of the story, because I think there's a lot of ways where you can cop out on it, and ways where it's been cheapened in a lot of games in ways that drive me absolutely nuts. For just a random example, kind of what WoW does, okay? You die, you turn into a ghost, you find your way back to your body, click a button, and suddenly you teleport into a new version of yourself, watch your former body turn into a skeleton. That's all well and good in a purely fantastical realm. But, as soon as you start bringing in technology, things have to be based in reason. There's no way around it. That's the whole idea. That's the only reason that technology even develops, is because of reason. And what I don't want... Well, hang on. I'm almost there.
Yeah.
But I've seen this get butchered in ways that really just are a killjoy for me in games such as BioShock. Where you had those funny little tanks that if you just bump into them while you're walking around, then suddenly they're just respawn points that are kind of doctored up. But they play no element whatsoever in the story. Because if those things actually worked, you shouldn't be able to kill anything in the game. They should all just come out of these respawn points all the time.
Well, yeah, they kind of should do. The problem is, like, the gameplay and the story element of death mechanics is really, really closely tied. And
Exactly.
if it isn't, then you get the situation you just mentioned, where you have this, this random thing that was just tacked in because people were dying and they didn't like starting at the beginning of the level. I suppose, like, the way I'd see it, the Alethians, very easy. I mean, you've got all these crystals. I'm sure there's a very easy way of, spiriting somebody back from the other world. The humans, I'd consider either resurrection via cloning. I play EVE Online quite a bit, and they do cloning quite well.
Sure.
The whole concept of, your neurons get scanned at the moment of death, and they all get transported to your clone. And that also, leads to a lot of gameplay things like, where does your clone, come from, and do you get all your items back and stuff like that.
Right, yeah, traditionally
Whatever.
That's based on some sort of insurance policy.
Exactly, yeah. Or possibly, everybody's favorite nanites, the concept of resurrecting somebody by, using these nanites and making them turn into new cells, into new,
Sure.
A way of repairing the body essentially past, its expiry date essentially. Those are pretty much the only two that I can really think of that kind of fit, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are some others, but, I can't really think of them at the moment.
No, I'm actually glad you brought it up. That's very cool stuff.
That could be interesting with the nanites. When you die, depending on what level you are and what class your nanites are, determine how much dead time you have as they reconstruct your body.
Oh yeah, and you'd come back based on the kind of nanites that you have in your body. You could pay for really, really good nanites that bring you back at full health and full everything, or you can just cheap out and get some ones that bring you back at half health or whatever.
Sure,
There are a lot of different elements you can take with that. With the Terran corporations, because a lot of that hasn't really been discussed too much. Well, it's been mentioned quite a bit. Hang on a tick. Are we actually doing names for them or anything like that, or?
It's something that we, of course, would have to explore at some point because you'd want there to be some big, heavy-hitting corporations, like even today. Like name one off the top of your head. Half of you will say Microsoft. And if you didn't, you should have. But and there needs to be that kind of equivalent in our world as well. If you're going to have corporations, there need to be specialists in the big fields who are kind of the dominant. I love the idea of monopolies because we try to avoid them in today's society because they can become too powerful. But that's the whole idea in this kind of future, in this kind of timeline, and of course it's been explored in a lot of different fictions. But the corporations did find a way to get way too powerful. So you should have these monopoly-based entities that, we have this company which produces weapons, this company which produces cyber technology, this company which is your go-to guy for nanotechnology, etc. and so forth. And they're all always trying to steal and backstab each other and try to find some way to get the larger profit margin than the guy next door.
All restaurants are Taco Bell.
Heck yeah, man. Now I'm hungry.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was thinking, actually. This idea of, a utopian society kind of being based entirely around the corporation that you're employed to,
Hmm.
I suppose, and that kind of factors into exactly what you actually do in the game. You get, I guess, a working salary and then bonuses for going out and, I don't know, exploring certain areas or making contact with certain people, basing it off that.
Sure, and the mission system itself would have to smooth. Well, okay, not even the mission system. That's inaccurate. The story driving the mission system, especially from the Terran end of things, would have to reflect that corporate hierarchy. That you're just somebody who's doing a job. Where on the Alethian side, it could be the same thing. There's no reason why you can't have multiple hierarchical divisions of the governing body of the Mage Lords. You have your hierarchs at different levels who are giving you their own quests or missions, things, tasks that you have to perform. And that's not to say there's no form of business to be found on Alethea. There's going to be some form of business. But
Absolutely,
I
yeah.
wouldn't want it to have that overly corporate-driven feel. At the same time, let's got to kind of roll my eyes at what I'm about to do, but you go back over to things like World of Warcraft. I play as the Horde, like all of the cool kids. But there are certain missions that you'll take as you play through the game where you are literally taking quests from members of the Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really have a problem with something like that because, again, I picture a lot of what we're defining here as being sort of a prehistory, and there is a limited degree of intermingling that has been going on between the two societies leading up to the point of actual gameplay. So there's no reason in my head why an Alethian, because they've been so fascinated with all this technology, can't start to become a little more affiliated with Terran society and maybe start taking jobs from these corporations themselves. Besides, I know if I was actually running a corporation, I can think of a lot of uses for somebody who is really good at magic. And the same way with the Alethians. They might be able to find some really interesting uses for somebody who is more technologically oriented. So I wouldn't mind seeing some cross-pollination, so to speak, as to who's working for whom.
Mm-hmm.
Just to expand on that, actually, I kind of really like the idea of this whole, because you've opened the door to space colonization and stuff like that, you could have these, joint colonies happening on these, I guess, partially inhabitable planets, full of dangerous wildlife and all that kind of stuff, where you'd have these mingling, you'd have, light posts that have no generators that just rely on magic crystals, essentially, for power, and you'd have all these other situations where technology and magic actually kind of come together and actually work.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a, I guess, can't really think of a good way of describing it. Essentially, just to show what can happen outside of the kind of aggression that is supposedly happening or has happened in the past between the Terrans and the Alethians.
Right. No, I follow you.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to work together, and this is where we get into. At some point, we'll probably. I don't want to say have to, because there's no real have to anything. You can work your way around anything you want, but it does help to have a common enemy. To keep people... I mean, this is one of the biggest things in all storytelling, in human history. What drives two enemies to shake hands and start working together, quite like a common enemy?
Yeah, pretty much. But, I mean, I guess it comes down to, is that what you really want to do? Do you really want to have, these two entities who work together? I suppose, in a way, it probably would have to happen so that you'd have people on, who roll a Terran and somebody else rolls an Alethian. And they want to try and interact in an NPC role-playing kind of way, you'd have to have some sort of common enemy.
Mm-hmm.
But it just kind of depends on whether or not you want to focus on the conflict between the two races or the conflict between the two races and a third party.
Right.
And that's not really... I haven't really decided on that. I guess nobody really has at this point.
Yeah.
It
Right.
just comes down to whether or not we need it.
Well, and something else that, and this hasn't really been brought up too heavily, because I know we've talked a lot about there being a lot of cross connection between these two races. The problem with this, and I try not to branch too much into gameplay, is that we are kind of destroying the idea of solid factions. After a fashion.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's going to be a lot of rather interesting corporations and religious sects or tribes or whatever between the two different races. I don't know. I think it's too early to really decide whether or not a third party is necessary.
Yeah,
I do
I
like
agree.
the idea of this cooperation between the two different races. That's really cool, to be honest with you. Plus, it gives us the opportunity to you guys the opportunity to create this I don't know, insect race or something really scary and mean that you can jointly go against with your friends.
Well, one of the cool things that
Um,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna branch off from this topic, so if you've got something to say about it, you may as well now.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the cool things that you get with the Alethians and the Terrans being somewhat friendly with each other is you get the conflict possibilities with corporations siding with either the Mage Lords or the Necromancers, and or like I said, you can get some infighting between different groups of companies, and some of the Necromancers teaming up with Terrans in different combinations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
so do something a little different than like World of Warcraft, where you have your two factions. I know everybody would absolutely hate this idea, but I'll just throw it on the table just so it's there. Where basically your horde can attack the alliance and vice versa. What if everybody could attack everybody?
I actually love the idea. It's something that at the very beginning, when I first decided, when we first started making MMO, I think it would be great if you could do that. At least in a limited form. It doesn't necessarily have to be every man for himself, so to speak. But where games like World of Warcraft, there are only small areas where that is even possible, and they're like arenas specifically for the purpose. That's very unrealistic. I'm a member of the Horde. Specifically, I'm a member of the Tauren. And what if my particular character just doesn't necessarily agree with all of the ideals of what's going on with the Orcs? And so I have a certain amount of personal hostility toward them. There's no reason why I think you should restrict people from role-playing that. If somebody wants to be crazy and just go like, well, I'm going to kill everyone in sight, yeah, that makes things a little more interesting. I don't have a problem with the idea of, finger quotes, sanctuaries, where, you're in an area where you can't attack anybody. Especially in inner cities, so that you can have some sort of law and order, a place where people can go and maybe get away from the madness of it all. But when you're out and about, I don't know why you can't just go ahead and let people do their own thing. At the same time, an easy way to solve the problem of the faction system is to just have two primary fields of belief within both races. So you have... just at random, those who really believe staunchly in preserving this peace between the two races, and those who believe there really needs to be a separation. I mean, harken back to the call of apartheid, and that's not even to say that the people who believe in that are evil. And apartheid, of course, was a terrible thing, but this is different in a way. I mean, think of the film District 9. You've got these two races that are alarmingly different from two entirely different worlds even. And so you're going to have your people who believe there needs to be a clear line of segregation between the two, versus those who are like, no, let's try to work together. And you could just more or less swear allegiance to one of these ideals or the other, and thereby have your factions kind of pulled out of the thin air, if you like. So I mean, there's two different ways that could go.
Okay. Yeah. I suppose with regards to the whole, complete and utter anarchy, as awesome as an idea that would be, I mean, you've got to keep in mind, of course, how that's going to be abused by people who have higher level characters and stuff like that.
Right.
I think so long as there are, consequences to your actions,
Right.
Absolutely. You should be able to essentially attack everybody. Anybody that you see, I mean, even NPCs, I mean, obviously you're not going to be able to kill any of them, but, if you have a grievance and you want to, get yourself killed, then I'm sure you should be able to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, the consequences is an absolute must if we did something like that.
Yeah.
What I just I cannot allow myself to go into gameplay mechanics to the degree that I want to right now. But just in short, I think it would be lovely for low-level griefing to come with a humiliation factor.
And I do want to toss out real quick. Again, we're gonna do our best to stay away from the actual game talk, but it's been thrown in. Michael's thrown in a couple times about bounty hunters, and that has already been heavily discussed.
We've all but got the user interface for how it's going to work, but
Yep.
we'll just leave it at that.
Yep. So we're already all over
that's
that one.
awesome.
Well, was there anything else
Brilliant.
you've got for us, Thomas?
Not really. I mean, I was going to mention the whole, idea of pirate organizations and stuff like that, but I mean, it's pretty much already been covered anyway. The idea of black markets, that's kind of getting too much into gameplay. I think I've talked your ears off enough. I think
you've done really well.
Thanks for your time.
No,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's see you later, Thomas.
Now we are at 54 minutes. Do you want to just?
We'll go a little bit longer.
Okay, I'm
Before
just
an hour and a half
just
will cut up. But Mr. George has been waiting out there for some time now.
Hey, George.
George.
Hello. Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
How you doing, Mr. Shivan Angel?
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear us at all?
Did I disappear? I didn't hear you. You actually disappeared from my end as well.
Oh, that's weird.
We did it just to scare you. How you doing?
Oh, that's all right. I'm doing okay. I hope not to take up too much of your time because I'm sure there are other people who want to talk with you. But I just had a few points I was going to go over.
Please.
And they all kind of lead one into the other, so I'll try to rattle them off as fast as I can, and then if you don't like them, just throw them out and get to someone else. The first one was the third enemy, and they'll kind of keep going back and forth with whether or not it needs to be a third race.
Okay, hang
or
tight
whether
just
or not
one
it needs
sec.
to be something
It's
in-house.
been a long time coming. I
Sure.
just need to go ahead and do this before I forget. The third
Okay.
common enemy. I just need to go ahead and swallow it up and get this in here. Let me go ahead and minimize this. And actually, let's just minimize the whole thing. So we got our little meta history. We won't worry about crossbreeding right now, but it's been mentioned. We've got our power. Pardon me. I'm just going to try to clean this up, and then we can absolutely go ahead and start exploring this in a more official capacity. All right, the third common enemy. What you got for me? I chased him away.
More or less, I was thinking, oh no, I'm here.
Okay.
You hear me, right?
Yeah, there's apparently a little bit of lag.
The third enemy. I'm sorry about that. My connection must suck. It's Comcast.
It's no problem
But
at all.
anyway, the third enemy, third enemy that I was thinking was rather than make you design an entire third race and deal with all that stuff, why don't you have this revolve around the Necros more or less and the corporations for either side? Since the Necros are a natural seen as enemy for the Elethians, and the corporations, or at least a new up and coming one, could be seen as a threat to the current corporations. You could just have a joint proposition between the two that's sort of rattling each race's current structure.
Mm-hmm. Actually, this is one of the biggest reasons why I did not go ahead and explore a third race when I was first drafting out the story, because I still think there's a lot of potential kind of in-house, if you will, to pull that out of the mythos we've already established.
Right. As far as the current present time as well, kind of to fuel this, I see this time as not like a downward spiral, I think someone had mentioned before with the Athelians, but instead this is the revival of civilization. These two groups have met, they've come together, and now it's a time for opportunity, and everyone sees opportunity here. So this also gives you the ability to make lots of quests where people go from one side to the other because, hey, there's money to be made, there's things to be had. It gives you reason and purpose to be doing all this stuff.
And I'm finding the home row. So I can add that to our years after. And I love that idea. That's really where that's where I pictured things being. Not necessarily in a state of heated conflict. Yeah, there's going to be some old animosities. These are two races that are still relatively young in terms of dealing with each other. They haven't been around each other for that long. But there's been a war. The war's gone away. For some people, the war is ancient history. For others, they still, if they don't necessarily directly remember, they still see the consequences of that war on a daily basis. And some folks, as we know even today, just have a hard time getting past that sort of thing.
Right, exactly. And the whole whether or not they remember it or not is another thing I was asking about, was the general age of these races, as in terms of how long do they live, their life expectancy. Because obviously the Athelians, at least the ones who aren't utilizing this horrible necro power, probably have a normal lifespan, maybe or maybe not, but at least the necro guys, they should probably be, they can live for a long time if they're sucking souls out and stealing energy and doing all these forbidden stuff, right?
Absolutely. And
so that was just another part. Keep going. No,
No,
go for it.
no, please. We're combating lag. I don't want to hold you up at all. Please continue.
It kind of ties back in with what I said before, where you could have the Necros coming in as a third enemy, literally old ones who remember this past war, who aren't just generations from beforehand, but guys remember what these people did to them, and they're going to use now these Terrans to take back their planet.
I actually really like that.
Yeah.
And this kind of, once again, branches off that, but I'm not completely sold on the idea of sort of the north and the south of the planet. I just see it more as a solar system-wide type thing, where it had been mentioned before, where they get banished to another planet, and you could easily write this off. I know part of the issue was weapons of mass destruction. So in order for the war to have been settled, you needed the threat of mass weapons destroying everyone, but they still needed to only destroy one planet. Because if they were on another planet, you could blow up that planet, and who would care about the Necros on that planet? Because the Athelians wouldn't care if they die, because they banished them anyway. But you could always write it in that the Arcanicite is extremely volatile, and if you go blowing up planets, you're not going to get any remaining if you try to
Sure.
use your weapons of mass destruction.
Sure. But then how did they settle the war?
Oh, sure. Yeah, a good question. That's what I was trying to come up with one before you called me in, actually, when I was thinking about that one. It's just, I just don't know if, you said the planet is obviously larger than Earth, or someone did.
I did.
I just, oh, okay, you might have done it before. I just see, I don't know, maybe they need the Athelians need to have some, whether or not they know there are other planets, or they just think there are other vistas of reality, or just, the same place or in other dimensions or whatnot, but it just seems like they need a little bit of planetary, even if it's in their own solar system, just like the outlying, if it's their Pluto that they get banished to or something. And you could always make it that those ones are very uninhabitable, they're harsh to live. The reason why the Terrans didn't just rip up those planets is simply because they're too hard to mine. The Necros are kicking their butt. They're actually a very hardy race, and it's easier to go back in-world towards the inner solar system, hence, something like Firefly with the inner world and the outer world. It's just easier, and then they start pissing off the Athelians who are in-world as opposed to out-world. But once again, you still have to rectify that whole how did the peace come out about this, and so forth and so on.
Well, I think you could leverage on some of the ideas that have already been kind of discussed. If you wanted the necromancers, the necros, whatever, to have an external influence from off-world, who's to say? I still like the idea of them being banished, not necessarily off-world, and okay, hang on. Let me get one thing out at a time. I like the idea that the Alethians have this universal reverence for the crystals, no matter what side of the conflict they're on. Be they whether they follow the forbidden magics or whether they follow the hard line of the mage lords, there's still this kinship to the planet, to the crystals, and while banishing them to another region is that's bad enough to kind of get them out of the way, so to speak. Just the idea of sending them away from that power source is I would like that to feel absolutely inhuman. You would never do that, not even to your worst enemy. Which is why I wanted to kind of keep them sort of on the planet.
To the moon?
No, but hang on. But I like where you're going, because so the necromancers, the necros, they get banished. But it's hard for them to really plan a strike back, to plan a revenge, to do anything about these memories, because of course they did lose the war, and they had to lose pretty hard if they had to go with being banished anywhere. I mean, you got to really kind of get your butt kicked, so to speak. I love the idea, and I think it's already been brought up at some point, for them to have established their own kind of secret colony. And there's no reason why, if they had done that, they couldn't go ahead and start, more or less mining their own Arcanicite from their lands and start making a hoard of it on this new secret location, so that they can do whatever they need to do without any sort of overwatch from the mage lords, without any sort of interference whatsoever, and rally their forces so that eventually they could come back.
Makes an interesting dynamic.
No, I think that's I like that. And then, just so I get off and I can let someone else have their time. The last thing I was going to say had to deal with. Let me open up your flowchart over here, and so I can take a look at it. Is the actual encounter history. So at the very beginning, we had that kind of fantasy idea about the world being flung around and thrown off into some distant place and striking the Earth or almost striking it. In keeping this more in the sci-fi, I thought it might be more interesting. You said a probe went out, and one way of rectifying this science-wise, if people like that, is you could say the probe went out, 100 years ago, and it wasn't one probe, it was thousands, because quite frankly, the human species, the Terrans, hadn't gotten to the point yet where they can transport themselves. Whatever the technology is, it'll kill people. So robots have to be the ones. Send the probe out, the war happens, the teleporting of this race from one planet to another, or the expulsion of them from one place to another, whatever energy or the war itself is what alerted the probe to the location of what actually happened. So the probe goes down, checks it out. It has a long travel back. The 100 years then pass for this civilization after the war, the 300, I think you had actually said. The probe goes over. By now, humans have figured this stuff out. They can now actually travel themselves. They travel over, and then they meet these folks. I don't know. I was just trying to think of a way to rectify all that in a slightly science.
No, and I love it for a few reasons actually. One of which was that when I first started doing this idea, I was not doing a mind map. I had just started kind of free writing, and I hadn't pictured it being that long of a distant time for the probe to discover the Alethians, and I also hadn't considered the fact that their war and the energies that were consumed in doing that would have been the cause of the signal. But I love the idea. I'd originally thought that the probe would have just kind of been out there for many, many years and eventually kind of staggered across. But I really, really like where your head's at with that idea. And if you'll pardon me just a second, I'll go ahead and work that in as an elaboration off the first encounter branch. So let's see. We can start with...
Yeah, take...
Go ahead, please.
No, that was I was just going to say that was the end of what I had to say.
Okay.
I'm out of ideas at this point.
All right. Well, then, thank you very much for chiming in with your ideas.
Absolutely.
Definitely some awesome stuff. And I'm going to take just a second before we even grab the next person and work some of those ideas in, but I will go ahead and thank you, and we'll move on in just a moment. Thanks, George.
Thanks, George.
And put his hand down. Okay, there we go. And give me just a second, folks. I'll pick up on the next person in just a moment, but as we all know, the use of too many things at once can cause problems. So, many years ago, detected energies. I can type, I promise. Or wherever. And we can just go from there, because then we have our envoy and everything. So I think, yeah, I think that summarizes that idea really well, and I really like that. That's excellent stuff. Now, before we move on, one more thing. We got our Mage Wars. Let's see, that ties into the Necromancers. Smallish region being marked off as exile territory. Let's go ahead and just branch off that, because I really liked that. In order to rally forces for possible revenge, which has been already explored in another part of the map, but let me just go ahead and include it here. And let's see. So I think that takes care of that. And then if I jump over underneath the magic powers, necromancy, let's just go ahead and here listed underneath necromancy leads to very long life, which could be one of the reasons why it's so heavily sought after by certain individuals.
Right.
And ties back into those who were necromancers still being able to remember the Mage Wars, because that struck a chord with me. I really like that one. And I'll just kind of leave our little concern about resurrecting Voldemort sitting here. And you know what, though? Just to go on record, I don't mind borrowing from that mythology after to a certain fashion, but I think we'd have to be careful not to overdo it.
So let's go ahead and bring Segfault in, and then we could see about perhaps one more or two more, as long as we make it quick, so that we could jump over and spend a bit of time going down through all the questions, because there's been a lot, and I really would like to also be fair to everyone that was not able to join in via VoIP and give them.
Well, then let's do this right now. Now, can everybody see this list and everybody see everybody else's hands up? I hope so, because right now I see Andrew Thompson, and then we got a couple of other people. Now, Gavin's already been in here once, but we're gonna have to call it on hands going up.
They don't see hands.
Okay, we're gonna have to call it on hands going up. If you haven't put your hand up right now, then that's it, because we've been going on for hours now anyway. So once we get through this next couple of batches of hands, do you want to just go through all the written questions and then we can go from there?
Yeah, that's good. So.
Okay.
We are, for those of you that, okay, Gavin, if you can wait, go ahead and remove your hand, but let's make sure the other three that we've got, we'll go ahead and address those. And we've got Mr. Segfault, Andrew, on the line right now. Hey, Andrew.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing very well.
Do you hear me okay?
Yes, sounds great. Whatever.
Okay, I've just started throwing a couple of ideas regarding the Terrans, see if I can put a bit of backstory there. I'm liking the whole cyberpunk situation that you've got going on there. I was thinking maybe if there was, I'm going to try and flesh out the hacker subculture and the underworld. And somebody suggested before the Arcani site possibly being refined somehow by the Terrans to make some kind of drug. And in the past, some time ago, maybe the leaders of the criminal underworld who had not subscribed to the so-called religion of the corporations, the advertising, was somehow trying to gain control over the flow of the Arcani site, through which they could control other people to somehow get enough power to try and overthrow the big corporations.
All right, hang on just a second.
He's gonna go ahead and get it set up now so that we can start jotting some of these underworld things down for the.
Let me
so you can go ahead and minimize that.
get some of this stuff out of my way.
I've been taking notes all the time, so I think I might have just said far too many things too quickly there.
Oh, it's all good. He's just getting set up so that we make sure that we have on record here the things that you throw out, because the underworld is something that's going to be very important to me personally. That gets into a lot of really cool possibilities.
And it's reflected already in the Society for the Necromancers, which we've already explored to a pretty good degree so far. Mm-hmm. So, fire away.
Well, there's the whole cyberpunk thing where you've got hackers and everybody wants to find things that are cheaper, and what's the best way to...
Well, we wouldn't say everybody wants to buy things cheaper, because you've got the rich, and the rich don't care. They buy the name brand that's just right there.
Yeah.
But you've got some very sophisticated, expensive technology that you just couldn't lay your hands on.
Like the black market.
That's exactly. I like the idea of the black market and the underworld markets having more to do with availability, as opposed to just getting things on the cheap. If you change the entire idea of social status to follow a hard line in terms of materialism, then you'd be proud to say that you blew X number of credits or dollars on buying this new fantastic widget. But what if you can't have it? What if you're not supposed to have it because it's military tech only?
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. And I think the idea is appealing if the hackers, the whole underworld subculture, was kind of building makeshift technology and through components that are available on the black market and kind of hacking things together
Okay, one second. I just wanted to tell Mohammed, thank you very much for joining us, and absolutely head on to bed. I completely understand. For those of you that are overseas, it is definitely getting very late. I tried to get us started earlier today, so that you guys could join in with us. I know it's going to be challenging working with times and all the various time zones that we've got to deal with. So you're going to find us kind of rotating our meeting schedules around so that we can accommodate as many of you as much as possible. Because I really would like to hear from everybody that wants to join in and participate, because this is awesome. But nobody needs to worry about asking if it's okay to leave out or anything. We can't thank you enough for joining and sharing ideas and interacting with other people. That's just fantastic, and it's really going to help drive the creation of this entire story forwards and make it into something that's just completely awesome with so much input coming in. So I just wanted to thank you for joining us and let everyone else know that those of you that got to go, we totally understand, because I know it's getting late there and a lot of you have to go to work tomorrow. So just a real quick thank you for those of you that were able to make it tonight. And Segfault, let me hand it back to you.
Well, I've got to say, Zach, the Johnny Mnemonic reference is useless because nobody's seen that film.
Oh, come on.
That's
I
actually,
saw that.
in a way, that's actually a shame. Because as horrible as the film is on a filmmaking level, it's got some really great ideas.
Segfault just went, "Pfft, whatever."
I'm sorry, he's just wrong.
He just unplugged. Says, all right,
Exactly.
I'm out.
No,
I'm not so sure about a dolphin hacker. Okay, so we can do away with that. But generally speaking, there are a lot of things that just don't get often explored in films that I did really like about the movie Johnny Mnemonic. It's a William Gibson work, as cheesy as it was and as horrible as Keanu Reeves was in the movie. There were some parts that I really liked.
But a memory doubler would be cool.
Yeah, exactly.
that doesn't mean people have seen it, though.
Good for them. Let them go watch it. I'm just writing that in for a note to myself.
Go ahead and add another
Everybody
branch.
here's seen it.
Go ahead and add another branch off of Underworld if you don't mind, because I see hackers.
Say black market.
I see black market.
Well, then you get into suppliers.
And we can go ahead off of black market if you want to put if you just want to put bounties down for the moment, because that's going to end up in the story later.
I would consider the black market, and this is just me. If you disagree, it's fine. I would consider the black market to be the acquisition of items and material goods. Bounties and that sort of thing would be its own branch.
Okay. Because that's what we're...
It's not just that. They could be like, dodgy clinics for augmentation, like technological enhancements and prosthetics that do shoddy work. But I'm not sure if that would come under the heading of black market. It probably could fit in there.
That would be like, well, not black market doctors, but...
Well, let's do this. Illegal weapons. Oh, don't do that. Illegal cybernetic upgrades. And it doesn't even have to be cybernetic. Let's also say biological upgrades. I love the idea.
Illegal data acquisitions?
That's the next one.
Information trade.
Yeah. Biological, and I just got to throw it in there so Jason doesn't freak out. Nanotechnological.
Oh, yeah!
Get my cursor out of the way. Thanks, folks. Okay, and then data acquisition and sale. These would probably be some of the big ones.
Drugs.
Yeah.
Vice. Let's just go with vice. Because then if you wanted to branch that into anything else, you could. Especially drugs. And then that can branch into this whole idea of this Arcan X thing, which we'll just kind of go with that as a temporary name. All right.
Cool.
Talk to me a little bit more about this whole hackers thing, because you really you start off really strong with you wanted to kind of define their role in society, but then you just kind of fizzled on me.
Well, the hackers are generally going to be the smarter of the whole underworld. So maybe those are the ones who are trying to bring everybody together to try and overthrow the big corporation. Maybe that's their lofty goal.
I'm starting to lose you in terms of your microphone, just so you know.
Okay, is that any better?
Yes, just come on. Stop staring at your Twilight pillow.
My God.
Oh, come on, Andrew. You know I love you.
That has been committed to video now.
Yep.
Yep, forever and ever.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, you sounded good. All right, so what else?
Okay, now I just totally lost my train of thought. Thanks for that.
You're looking at your pillow. Stop it.
Look right here on the screen. There you go. Nice and big for you.
Well, it will be the hackers that were trying to gain control of the Arcan X, the drug. So if they can control that, they can obviously make a lot of money.
No, hackers aren't trying
well-
to get their hands on. Hackers deal with.
Yeah, yeah. I would actually picture the hackers being as they picture themselves as liberators of information.
Yeah.
They're going to be you're
infiltrating into systems and
yeah,
manipulating data, putting
stick it to the man.
Yeah, putting false information in that's used wrong, or altering information, or for hire, for stealing information.
Yeah, it would be more the mafia that would
corporate
be into the
sabotage.
drugs.
Well, but that'd be where we finally get your pirates in, Lee.
There we go. For transporting.
Well, maybe the underworld context could be expanded a little bit to include this group who were trying to overthrow the corporation to try and gain control of as much money resources as possible through the use of the hackers and the black market and so on and so forth.
Well, hang on. Let me branch off for just a minute.
Well, let's put another one off of this. And I know some people might laugh at the title, but Lee's been saying it for days. Go ahead and put pirates, because we can give them. They could be drug runners and people who
Sure.
obtain.
Well, let's just say we'll put down piracy, but I'm going to further define it as facilitators of the black market.
Okay.
Okay, so you're not necessarily a hacker. I'm sorry. You're not necessarily a pirate if you just go in and steal data. You got to find some way to move it, and that's where you get into your actual data pirates, who they coordinate with the hackers, they coordinate with the corporations, be like, hey, we found this, and we're going to sell it to you from this other company. They're the ones who turn things like data thievery and espionage into cash flow. But let me throw something else out here too, unless I've said something really bizarre that requires further clarification.
I don't think so.
While these hackers do have this anti-corporate mentality, I love the idea that the corporations use them.
Yes, absolutely.
And not necessarily in a couple of different ways. So they could hire them to,
As
to hack
security
competitors.
services.
for basically corporate sabotage.
But yeah, exactly. Hire them to hack competitors, but at the same time, there are corporate hackers as well. I mean, they're going to need to go in and destroy some of their own systems. They're going to need to, imagine intrusion countermeasures for hacking. These days we generally rely on software. But what if there is another hacker literally in the system hunting you down? Mm-hmm. You need a corporate hacker for that kind of thing. You need somebody who's affiliated with the company, who believes in the ideals of the company, and is zealous enough to hunt down and strike down those who are attacking his beloved corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And just here, not really.
Could you hack spells?
Actually, I'm trying to think of a really nice way to put this.
I wouldn't think so, Andrew. Spells come more from the magical realm.
Chiefs I can't spell today.
And while Zach is typing this out, I've got to say, there's still 50 of you guys out there. I'm so blown away that this many of you are hanging out with us. And for those of you that are new to game development, I'll just say my apologies that we're going on this long, but welcome to the real world. I mean, a really well thought out story. It takes time and a lot of brainstorming, and it's awesome that so many of you guys are really hanging out for this and tossing so many comments out there and giving awesome suggestions.
You know, and there's something else you could do here as well, if you'll pardon me. What if I do this? Let's insert another little floating element. And this one I'm actually going to call Underworld, not the other one. This one I'm going to rename, at least for now, to Terrans. And I'm going to graft it here.
And that looks just like my little picture I drew for you.
Exactly. I realized what we were getting at earlier, and then I lost track of it, just with trying to do so many things at once. But then we can graft this onto the other side, and then the Alethians can certainly have their own underworld as well. And and we don't have to think of it like the underworld, like necessarily a quote-unquote black market, as perfectly reflected by the Terrans. I mean, these can just be the followers of the forbidden magics and the things that they're up to and they believe in, as it relates to not following with the social norms.
Well, you get into the fun things where you've got the regular Alethians, not the necromancers, who want to live longer,
right? Who
need contacts in with the necromancers to acquire the rituals to live longer.
But however, I want to throw that in there, so it's a good starting point. But that's not something that Andrew was looking at exploring right now. So what else do you have that we can go ahead and explore, so we can move on to the next person with their hand up?
Well, that's nearly it, but there's one more thing I'd like to mention. I like the way that you've branched this up. You've kind of made the seem like everybody's in symbiosis with everybody else in kind of like a dog-eat-dog world in like the lower end of society. But what I was trying to work in was some way for the whole of that society to have some kind of lofty goal to try and, to maybe try and get rid of the corporations and to try and control everything themselves.
Sure, try to get out from under the thumb, so to speak.
Yeah, but you would need some kind of extra element in there, some person who's going to lead them to it, who's going to bring everybody in the subculture together to a common goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think what you could do. See, maybe it would be the mafia or something, or like the Yakuza.
Let's see.
Some kind of criminal organization that's going to kind of use all the resources available in the underworld to try and get rid of the corporations.
Yeah, there you go. That worked really well right there.
Just branch off as organized crime, and from that could arise a potential leader for an anti-corporate movement.
Mm-hmm.
They want to keep everything in the family.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you very much. Look at this. We've got a whole new tree going here of some of the awesome stuff, the place I would frequent most often probably in the game.
Yeah. This is where your novels come from, really.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, well, Andrew, thank you very much for your time tonight. Glad you were able to make it. And
yeah, thank you for listening to me.
Oh, absolutely. Great stuff. And we'll be talking with you soon, sir. See ya. Okay, so let's move on
to Javier. Oh, hello, Javier.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, I can barely make out what you're saying.
This might be challenging.
Okay,
that's better.
I'm really far away from you guys.
You sound. I can. You're really muffled somehow.
Yeah. But let's try.
Let's give it a shot. What you got?
Okay. I don't know if you hear me better now. Excuse my English. I'm really not my native language.
I understand.
Well, I give it a try.
Okay.
Well, to shake the things up a little bit, I don't really like the idea of the arcanesite being a crystal or something like that. It's like really overdone. It's in so many histories.
Okay.
Maybe it could be a biological adaptation of the people or living things living in Atelia, or I don't know what was the name. Maybe it could be like the whole planetary system is revolving around I don't know, a twin star or something like that, that make them to, I don't know, like synthesize like the trees done chlorophyll or something like that.
I see what you're saying. The problem I have without there being some sort of physical catalyst for these powers is that you make the transfer of powers to anybody off-world very difficult. You also immediately remove the one of the main driving forces for our Terrans or humans to really try to get in and take something. That initial conflict, which came from the Terrans wanting to claim this crystal, this element, whatever this is, as a power source. One of the things we had explored early on that I really I'm kind of attached to, because it's reasonable, even though it's been done a few times, is the need to find an alternate form of energy by the Terrans, and if you can find something like that, be it a crystal, be it maybe some sort of fluid that's inside the planet, because that's very much like what we have today with crude oil, or any other form of substance, maybe a gas, I don't know. But having some sort of element that needs to be harvested from the planet itself has so many connotations with the raping of a planet, which we're dealing with now, with taking something that maybe the planet doesn't necessarily belong to the Alethians in that sort of sense, but it's their world, and it's now being taken apart. But it's needed to fuel the ongoing industry of the Terrans, and so they've got their own motivations as well. I really feel strongly that there needs to be some sort of physical, collectible, harvestable entity that is being sought after, even if it wasn't a crystal. I think there needs to be something.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I was thinking more on some sort of hormone on every living thing in the planet. Like they should, I don't know, chop down trees to get it, or even hunt Elysians to get it.
Okay.
Yeah, because you could have the harvesting of Alethians.
But my only problem with that is that makes the Terrans immediately evil. Clearly evil.
It makes them hard to want to work together, too.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes it virtually impossible to want to find some common ground.
Well, I didn't really like the idea of a common enemy. I would really play a necromancer. They really rock.
I didn't catch that. Can you say again?
I prefer. I don't like the common enemy. I prefer the necromancer to be a third type of character, playable character.
Okay.
Yeah.
Instead of a common enemy, I think that the common enemy is like they will drive down the. I don't know. Maybe it's kind of early, but the PvP stuff of the game. Maybe we should hang together to do 1,000 raid bosses of the necromancer. That doesn't really look like pretty fun to me.
Okay. I mean, do you have a suggestion you'd rather see it go?
I prefer to have the necromancer as a playable character.
I think they probably will end up being. I think Jason would probably have a conniption fit if they weren't.
Heck yeah, they have to be.
Because I think that's the only thing Jason is interested in playing at all in the game.
Maybe in the story, maybe the mage lords told the Terrans to hunt the necromancers, so we have like everybody hates everybody, stuff like that.
Well, you could definitely have that going on with more complex story arcs between different subsets
Sure.
of the different factions.
You expose intrigue and backstabbing and people like constantly trying to conspire against while attempting to maintain the facade of working together.
Which is why Spartacus is one of my favorite shows in the world, because it's very complex as far as who really does like who and who's really, out to stab someone else in the back. It gets very complicated. And so that could definitely be done with, especially with different, like I said, subsets of the factions.
That was all. If I came up to something else, I let it know. But same for listening to me. I'm sorry about my English, but well.
Oh, no.
You did very well.
Yeah,
and
you did real
thank
well.
you very much for calling.
There's no problem. Thanks to you guys.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, let's see. And
Chris Martin.
yes,
is
Chris
next
has
on the
been
list.
hanging out there waiting for a little while.
Hello, Chris.
Hello, guys.
Hey.
What's up?
Hello. I was looking at what you were going through back there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah, I can hear you
yes.
just fine.
Okay. About meeting of the two new races, dealing with the Ethereans and the Terrans. Say that you can't, you haven't got, space travel. You can't, go and, across between the two. So that, you've got to get to, traveling through space first. That'll give you, two sort of, storylines there, yeah? Does that make sense to you?
Not at all. Can you
It's
try again?
having, yeah, okay, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's like Ethereans and the Necromancies. That would be one sort of storyline where you'd stay there, and then you'd have Terrans versus someone else, Idians or whoever.
Well, the infighting
And
on
then
on the
you
side of the
develop
Terrans
into-
could be between the corporations and these kind of hacker outworlders who are very anti-corporation.
Mm-hmm. Well, the idea is that you've got to start from the beginning, because earlier you said when new players come in, they automatically get space travel, but not given. The idea is to not give them automatically space travel. They have to get to that point first.
So you're thinking about taking the storyline before the first contact between the two races, and then going forward
Yeah, that's
from
right.
there?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. I hadn't really considered that because I was really trying to get everybody up to a point where they could experience the game where the conflict has been kind of established. A war has taken place. We're trying to work together. There's some really positive aspects to those who want to see the Alethians and the Terrans kind of join together, and there are those who really, really don't want to see that happen, allowing the player to kind of choose between the two. My problem with going all the way back to first contact, so to speak, and letting a player go through that is that, to me, it seems like you're kind of narrowing down the scope of the gameplay into what should be a single-player game.
Oh, okay.
And that's just my take on it. And I'm fine with somebody saying that they disagree, but I really would like to hear how they disagree. I think once you get somebody up to a point where all of the major conflicts have been at least quelled to a primary degree, there's no more gigantic war going on, and we're trying to work together. I think it's interesting enough to give players a choice as to how they want to interact in the world. But if you go all the way back to, we haven't even discovered each other yet, then what you've got is almost like a sub MMO that you have to play through, because other than that, it would be a single player game that you'd have to get through until you get to the point where you could interact with the rest of the world. And I don't want to see that happen. I want the underlying themes to be bringing the players together as opposed to sectioning them off in other little sub games where they spend a lot of time alone.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see that.
And in my
how-
opinion, real quick. Sorry, I just want to throw this in real quick, Chris. That is the way I see it. Is if we get all the way up, or we're way past, first encounter and up to present time in the game world.
Or if we define that as present time.
Yeah, we can make for some very complex story arcs between the two sides, or between the three.
Right.
There's just a lot of interesting things we could do.
Right.
Okay. Have you thought about putting pet systems in the game?
Gameplay.
Oh, hang on. Yeah, heck yeah, we're going to have something like that.
I think it's just kind of become a standard for MMOs, but I really, really don't want to get into gameplay right now.
But yeah, I definitely would like to see, as I've already mentioned on the radio show, I would love to get aspects of the game involved that would move over to like the iPad, the iPhone, Android phone possibly, and the web for those that don't have these kinds of devices, where if you had, let me just say, some sort of robotic pet that had some sort of data gathering capability, and you were able to send it to do something, but then you were able to, in real life, jack into it to see what it's doing, or control it, or whatever, through your iPhone or your iPad, or through a web browser interface. Just looking at different ways to interface with technology that you have going on in the game, so you can play the game, do what do like normal, as if you were playing like World of Warcraft or something. But then when you leave the game, you go to work for the day, you can still pull out your iPhone or some other device, or even just jump on a browser and
and do something that in some way influences the game or your character.
Absolutely.
Set your pet to gathering something for you.
I'm just using, you asked about pets, so I'm just using that as an example. Not saying it'll necessarily be pets. I mean, it could be a lot of different things, but I think that would be, I think that'd be really, really awesome.
Yeah, it sounds awesome already. The other couple of things was more about gameplay. Other than that, that's about it so far.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for calling in. It's great to get to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, Chris.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Speak to you later, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, let's bring Mr. Gavin back in for just a second.
What do you want,
What do you got, Gavin?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I think I got red light fever at the beginning of the game in the way I do on the radio show, and just became a stuttering, incoherent.
Oh no! I think
all
what's
again.
happened is you've gone off. You've grabbed a bottle of tequila. You've now finished it, and you sound like you're talking much smoother.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
So what you got?
I will keep this brief.
Okay.
I will keep this to the biggest. Well, to me, the thing that hit me hardest, which was. I mentioned this in passing with reference to just generally the graphical style of things. I can't remember if it was on the last video or before it, but there is a very stereotypical view of mages. I think I said Gandalf stood on his rock with his arm in the air, wearing his
way
flowing
too
robe through the
early for
storm.
concept art.
Yes, this isn't concept art. This is why it hit me when you were talking about keeping the two races. Well, keeping the Elethians human-esque, and also ties into what I'm afraid is another gameplay thing, but just in terms of them being able to withstand getting shot with high-tech weaponry.
Sure.
Why not make them the hard ones? Why not make them the mages? The magical power that is given to them by the substance affect them. Genetically, they live with it, they've grown up with it, it's part of their world, in the same way that carbon is part of us. Why not make this part of them? That's why, as you've said before, generationally, the longer they're away from it, the less and less their powers get. Also, would tie into, I'm doing my list here, also ties into the idea of it being the drug, the synthetic version of it, aside from other things, would give you, a bit physical power. Because it seems to me that the power of the Terrans is, they're humans, so their power comes from our thought. It comes from what we can make and protect ourselves with in terms of armor, make nanotechnology to rebuild ourselves. then why not give the strength of your buff fighters to the mages? Because in terms of the sort of fights that are going to be going on, there's going to be weaponry from the Terran side. So it's the magic. It ties up a lot of things. Again, back to the I've forgotten the name of the drug, and it's not on the screen at the moment. The Arcanicite.
Mm-hmm.
The drug? Arcanex.
Arcanex right now.
The Arcanex, but also the Arcanicite. You know, it's and to the idea of making it a biological rather than rock-based sedimentary thing. If it doesn't have, it could be, for instance, in the plant life of the planet. In the same way that we brought potatoes and tobacco, well, tobacco particularly, back from the New World.
Absolutely. My only problem with that, and it's really it's very, maybe even metaphysical, is that you're still having to suggest that the Terrans need to arrive and start extinguishing life, even if it's plant life, in order to get their hands on this power source. And I really don't like that idea.
You did. Well, only in terms of in the way. You can cover that in the same way that the forests are managed by forestry. It's a question of being able to replenish them.
Right, but now it looks more like an. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's not like it doesn't necessarily have to be the product of giant sequoias and oak trees that take hundreds of years to grow. It could be a bush that flowers twice a year.
Sure.
It depends on that. But
or
then
a spore
that
of
does get
some
into the gameplay mechanic of
degree.
how much of this inflationary effect it has on gameplay and such like, which I'm trying to avoid the gameplay sort of aspect of it.
Right.
But it just seemed to tie into a lot of things that Segfault was saying, and that I forget the other chap's name was saying.
You could play off of it a bit, as opposed to the Arkansite becoming part of the makeup of the Lithians, where one of the where one of the concepts was mentioned earlier, where the Alethians start to take the form of their particular powers. You could have certain Alethians that have physical forms, where instead of being able to cast, their bodies become tougher, hardened, and they're more of the melee type and use the traditional swords and arrows, or bows and arrows, and can withstand more powerful attacks, where you still have the more traditional mage types that are a little bit more frail and can't withstand it as much, but they have the ability to cast fireballs and arcane spells, etc.
Yeah, that's cool. I was just the only other thing, and I'll throw this out as an idea for you three to hit around rather than going into it in any great detail, was the idea that, well, rather than what we're calling the necromancers being banished to a different part of the planet on the surface, if they were maybe banished to the center of not the center of the planet, but underground in the planet. If the Arcanicite occurs near the surface, that would also punish them by taking them away from the source of their power. But that's just a big sort of sprawling, amorphous idea in my head.
Sure. Or I mean, they might have gone to ground willingly. It's entirely possible that they've decided that's a great way to hide and rebuild their society out of sight and out of mind, so to speak.
Yeah, but like I said, I won't go into that more because again, the spark for that was gameplay related in terms of. We haven't actually talked about any underground dungeon-esque, traditional dungeon-esque habits. But again, that's gameplay, not story.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Gavin. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-minute break, and I'm going to go ahead and get this video basically wrapped up. So, because we're an hour and 48 minutes in. Then after the 5-minute break, let's come back. For those of you that care to stay, Zach, let's basically rewind our question log over here. And we're going to start digging back down through the things that were said and just see if we can quickly hit on things. And in case there's something important that we run over here, I just want to make sure we hit everything. We'll get it logged into our system. So with that, for those of you that are listening into the video, thank you very much, and we'll continue in the next one.